Right, the webinar is now live and people are coming in. Hi, good to see you. We have got 80 people signed up today, which is great. We'll give it a few minutes for people to start. Hi, Peggy, how are you? Hi, Tad, hi, Rachel. Hi, Daniel. I'll say what I say every time we do these Zoom webinars. It would be so much nicer to be sitting in a conference room in a five-star hotel, having just had a coffee and looking forward to a beer, but that will happen again at some point soon. So I would love to introduce you to Jess Blackmore of Dwellworks. Thank you so much for putting this together. It's great to see you all. We've got a great diverse panel. And today we're going to be looking, as you know, from the title, about the impacts and the, how business travel is going to look as we move forward. So a fascinating topic. I was in an immigration session last week with a couple of experts from all over the world. And it was interesting talking about the USA and just thinking about whether or not your ESTA is going to get linked to any kind of like permission to enter the country, because mine is just about to expire. So there's a lot to discuss. Thank you so much as a panel. And Jess, over to you.
Thank you so much, Dominic. That was a lovely introduction. As Dominic said, my name is Jess Blackmore and I am with Dwellworks Living, and it's my pleasure today to welcome everybody to the EuRA briefing on 2021 and what to expect in global business travel. There's a question. I'm sure like me, as the clock struck 12 New Year's Eve, you were looking forward to a more free and positive 2021. And I think so far we can say actually it's been a bit of a disappointment. We're still finding ourselves fighting this sort of unseen enemy that seems to mutate like something out of a Marvel movie. As an industry, we're diversifying, we're flexing in order to combat these unprecedented times, and on a personal level we're all still working from home, missing our family, our friends, our colleagues and events. But as ever with adversity there's always innovation, and so I'm delighted to be joined today by Carol Fergus from Fidelity International, Juliet Howie from National Corporate Housing, Steve Frey from Oasis Corporate Housing, and Dima, having pulled the short straw again, staying up late in Hong Kong to talk to us about what we are seeing, what's hot, who's innovating, and trends from around the world. I'm going to ask, if I can, Carol, first of all, to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then if you'd like to pass on to one of the other panel members. Thank you.
Hello, thanks for having me. As you said, I'm Carol Fergus and I'm responsible for global travel, meetings and ground transportation for Fidelity. I've been with the company about 3 years, been in travel for a very long time, more years than I care to divulge. I also sit on the GBTA, co-leading on the diversity and inclusion, and like to do that's one of my passions in the travel industry in terms of taking it forward, because it's about our people. Today's panel is really exciting because it's about, where we all are and where we're going. So thank you for allowing me to participate.
Thank you. Juliet.
Hello everybody, good morning, good afternoon for all the participants. Really great to meet you all. As per my introduction, I'm Juliet Howie. I'm Global Head of Enterprise Sales for National Corporate Housing. And before that I was with Bridge Street, so recently acquired by National Corporate, so we're going through a very exciting time. And then prior to Bridge Street I was working for Oakwood Corporate Housing, and then before that, like Carol, I'm not going to divulge how many years, but I've been in hospitality and business travel for a long time, working for global hotel groups as well. And like Carol, I'm also very active with the GBTA. I'm co-chair of the Accommodations Committee in Europe for GBTA. And I love these type of discussions we're going to have today. I think it's very exciting to talk about what's happening in different countries, in different verticals, in different areas. So really pleased to be here. So look forward for today's discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Juliet. Steve, all the way from Tampa, Florida.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name is Steve Frey. I am the CEO of Oasis Corporate Housing. We started in 2008. And we expanded globally in 2011, 2012. I'm currently the vice chair of the Corporate Housing Providers Association, and that's primarily representing North America, but there's a lot of changes going on there too as well. So thank you for having me. Looking forward to it.
Thank you. And Dima, last but not least.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and thanks for having me as well. My name is Dima Lawrence. I'm the VP for Account Management Services at APAC, at Dwellworks out here in APAC. I'm, as you can hear from the accent, I'm originally from Germany, but was born in Hong Kong, then grew up in Germany, and have now been spending a good almost 20 years now back in Asia. 15 out of those in relocation. I used to have my own DSP and real estate business that was acquired by Dwellworks a few years ago, and I'm now looking after the commercial interests of Dwellworks out here in the region. Yeah, absolute pleasure to be here today, and hopefully I can add a couple of input, a little bit of content from the Asia Pacific region.
Thank you so much, everybody. We've got a great panel here today, as I'm sure everyone will agree. So I thought let's get us kicked off. And as our buyer on the panel, Carol, if you'd like maybe to start, do you think what is people are starting to think, say that tentative thought, let's return to travel, you know, what are people thinking about? What's hot topics you're hearing from travelers and the buyers, and you know, what are you hearing from your side of things?
Okay, so as the buyer for Fidelity, and obviously sitting on a number of with a number of groups, sitting on panels, done a lot of workshops, etc. For us as an organisation, what we're hearing and what people are doing is a review of policy. And the reason for that, the Kickstarter for that has been two things really. Technology being one of them, the fact that we're all working from home and we've proven that we can use the technology without having to travel. So it's looking at, you know, our how we can utilise that technology in the future and what will that will look like for our travel. There's also the piece around sustainability and the amount of carbon emissions that we've shown that we've been able to reduce. So again, you know, hot topic for lots of organisations. Added to that, talking to the travellers, we have the travellers are becoming a lot more considered with regards to, you know, whether they want to travel, what mode of transport they should be using. Are we going to fly? Are we going to use trains? Are we going to hire cars? You know, where they should be staying. Should they stay longer? Should they travel at all? Or should they utilise the technology that they have? And, you know, support with, you know, reducing the costs, supporting on reducing the carbon emissions again. Travellers want clarity as well. So, you know, when they do travel, they want to know that they've got that support with regards to their bookings, what they can and can't do, what they need to do, what forms need to be completed. So the partnering between global security and the TMC has never been as great as it is now, because we all need to collaborate and work together to make sure that we are giving our travellers the communication and the information that they need to make those choices, and whilst travelling feel safe and secure. Mm-hmm. With regards to the companies, airlines, hotels, etc., there needs to be this working together and collaboration with regards to standardization. The industry needs to look at what they're doing. If they want travellers to come back out there and travel, they need to make it easy for them and the experience a lot better. So they need to standardize things. What we don't want is for every airline to have their own app, so that every time you travel, you're looking at different apps, lots of different forms to be completed, and the notification and the new communication needs to be very, very fast, very clear, so that people think, well, actually, this is actually really a pain, and I'd rather just stay in the office and do a Zoom. If they want to entice people back, then they need to make sure that that information is clear and it's standardized. And then the other thing is, that suppliers can do is look at loyalty. You know, how do we want to get people to come back? You know, what will be the enticers to get people to get on those planes, to get in the trains, to use our hotels? So just look at the loyalty schemes, look at, you know, things like amending and cancelling tickets, refunds, just make it really seamless and easy for our travellers so that they think actually it's not that difficult. And once we get past the whole testing, the vaccine, we understand what we're doing, we're comfortable to travel because it's not a nightmare to do that. Mm-hmm. And for me as a buyer, I want to work with suppliers that make my life easy. So really understand me as a company and ensure that, you know, that I'm getting what I need to communicate to my travelers and make my program work seamlessly. And the final thing is that travelers want to feel safe and a hassle-free experience. So I think for me, they're the kind of key things that are jumping out. And as a buyer, that's what would help me in terms of managing my program and getting my travelers out there in the future.
Oh, thank you. That's some great insight. So definitely hearing a lot about sort of standardization and ease and comfort. So perhaps I'll just pass that over to Juliet. And as a supplier, how are you looking at responding to sort of these sort of needs as a traveller?
Yeah, and again, just a little bit of feedback of what to emphasize on what Carol was saying, where we're seeing a very slow confidence in return to business travel. And looking at as recent ITM studies showed a 95% drop from March to May versus this year over last year. So the confidence still needs to be there. 20% of companies are returning to offices, which is really small, and this is kind of globally as well. So it's going to be quite a while before we get to a normal state of play. And really forecasting business travel is going to return to 50% of where it was for Q4 2021. And we're looking at, a slow return to get back to the normal levels of 2019, really over a course of about 5 years. All the indicators are showing that. And how does that affect us, to your point of suppliers? Well, obviously, straight away, the bottom line revenue losses, we're having to live and work around that and adjust our models to support that. And then hugely what's happening in the industry is the talent drain. We have a huge talent drain as staff are furloughed, people are made redundant, and that will have an impact on the buyer contacts and consistency with the programs, as well as contacts change, as the travel programs change. As Carol was saying, she needs that confidence and that security with her partners to work through the program and to help travelers with the program. So we as suppliers need to make sure we still have the right people in the right places to help support the buyers as we come and grow and get out of this. So that is going to be quite a big impact on us. And for the travelers as well, the constant change in regulations, it's causing confusion. Countries are operating different vaccines at different paces, different lockdowns, different quarantine rules. Do they need to be in a hotel or an apartment for so many nights? Don't they? It keeps changing. So again, that's very confusing. So we have to work really closely together and really communicate with our clients, as to what's happening per country. And even when we have guests staying in house, when they arrive, it could be one rule, and then suddenly a month later they're in house and it's a different rule, and maybe they can't even leave the country. So we have to support them through that as well. And I think moving forward, pre-trip approval is going to be key for a lot of travelers. They're going to have to need C-suite approval. Is a trip really necessary? An increase in insurance and liability. So it's going to be harder to get those approvals going through the process, for corporate companies. What I will mention here is BTN have put a very good document together called, it's like a corporate travel index. And I know Carol was looking at this as well, which gives you a risk score based on GeoShore. And it also gives you average hotel costs, meal costs, and car rentals. So GeoShore is kind of a real-time safety ratings that's updated, and they use resources like United Nations, Center of Disease and Control, Prevention, US State Department. So that's a really good place for suppliers and buyers to kind of look and work through and look at that, and it's constantly updated. And I think in summary, kind of if you break it down into bite-sized timeframes, I think short term, it's the change of policy that Carol also mentioned. Assurance is needed from suppliers to adapt to those safety standards, really not just saying, yes, we're doing more cleaning. That's not good enough, we have to go a little bit further. Cost management, how can we help support through cost management, risk and assessment policy, and wellness and sustainability and diversity is big, and we need to make sure we have the programs in place to support that, as well as through all the consistent staff changes we have as suppliers. And then medium term, I think buyers are going to review their suppliers. You know, there's a partnership, but I think there's constant review, and who's open, who's closed. You know, some of the partners, many of the buyers have been using for years have closed down, maybe not reopening, so that needs reviewing. And I think technology platforms, you know, are key as well, and they're getting more and more the whole digital space, really, which is going to help for data storing, compliance and reporting, and will also help with those virtual solutions. So we're going to see more of that. And then I think longer term, as we kind of come out of this, hopefully towards the end of the year, I think we're going to have integrated policy for mobility and travel as they work together, you know, using the strengths from each program, because often they're quite separate programs. And I think there's going to be more merger between the two. And maybe, you know, sourcing suppliers that provide a really high touch point solution, so that the technology, but with a really strong personal backup as needed as well, because technology is great, but you need to have, when things go wrong or don't go to plan, you still need to have that high touch contact person. And again, looking at a BTN survey, 34% of buyers said a booking tool would be more important going forward, which I think was really quite a high percentage. So yeah, I think that's
some great insights. Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. Yeah, Steve, I mean, obviously you're seeing the same as we're seeing here in EMEA and APAC, but also you've had the added of an administration change over in the States, and maybe travel being slightly easier coming into the US. So I just want to sort of take your opinion on sort of what we just chatted about with the two ladies there.
Well, first, I mean, we hope it gets easier.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting with the change in administration. I thought that would, you know, he was Biden was talked quickly about passing through some executive orders to undo some of the things that were previously done. A lot of those things have happened. What's interesting with immigration is it's a little bit of a wait and see. He's put out, I think just yesterday, he put out presidential, I forget the word that he used, but it was almost to the effect of review and recommendations coming. So he mentioned all of the topics of immigration that they are looking at, but nothing was actually undone as of yet. So you know, I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir with everybody that's on this, is that we all look at the world as our backyard, and it's where we enjoy the exploration and going around to different places, and it's part of what makes us excited about what we do. So I'm waiting for that to happen, just as I'm sure all of us are waiting to be able to get on a plane and go see each other in person, but it just has not happened yet. I do think that part of that is tied to COVID. They're still trying to look right now. You know, the vaccinations haven't rolled out as quickly as they thought they would. Even as that rolls out, now we're talking about the variants, right, that are out there, and so what will the impact of that be? So I think, you know, essentially, you know, kind of putting the brakes on changing things quickly without an in-depth review of the potential impact tied to COVID is probably what is causing the pause, I would think. But we're ready. We're ready. We're you know, immigration is what fuels, at least for the temporary housing business. It's a significant portion of what we do. Intra-company, more domestic moves are still happening. And I was actually very surprised that when this all started, I thought for sure our volumes would go down far more significantly than they have. But you know, luckily, as it relates to the business we do within the U.S., it's a big country, and so people will still move from California to Ohio, you know, and you know, different locations. So that business is still intact. It hasn't taken as big of a hit as we thought. So yeah, that's where we're at with the immigration view. Here, it's just a little bit more wait and see.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think everyone's sat here with bated breath, and yeah, one day, fingers crossed, you know, we'll all start to feel the normal again, whatever normal was.
Yeah, we're ready to get back to EuRA in person.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard about these conferences. I want to go. So Dima, over on your side of the world, I mean, things seem to be starting to move a little bit already, or how are you finding it?
They have started to pick up again, but pretty much echoing what Steve and Juliet also said. The main concern currently is still around immigration and border control. I mean, it's really not so much a question of what our clients want. It's more of the question of what are they allowed to and where are they able to go. And that continues to be really so much of our daily work, of the team's daily work, is just reviewing the processes and figuring out how transferees and business travelers can get to certain destinations. I mean, it's fairly straightforward for some of the larger markets. If you look at China, Hong Kong, Singapore, Australia, the regulations are all very clear. They're very effectively communicated, and that makes obviously our job a little bit easier. But then when you look at some of the more emerging Asian economies, anything from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, it's a lot harder to find the right information that you need. And the amount of effort that goes into that process of just trying to see whether the request from the client side is actually feasible at all, whether there is currently the possibility of sending a certain transferee to the destination, becomes this whole new work activity that we previously obviously didn't have to do. With that together, we still see a lot of demand for quarantine support after the arrival, obviously. But there's a lot of questions up front on whether we can support with call-in numbers, whether we can provide extended welcome baskets or deliveries, anything from stationery to gym equipment that we recently had to bring to quarantine hotels, which all makes a lot of sense. But the interesting thing is that a lot of these questions come before arrival, and transferees and clients are very concerned, obviously, on these topics. But then after arrival, there's a lot less uptake on these services than we anticipate, because essentially people are figuring out that once they are at the hotel or the service department that is providing the quarantine, that a lot of these providers, particularly out here in APAC, are actually very well organized and have a lot of the sort of day-to-day tasks sorted already. So there's a lot more talk up front and very little on the actual need for the services afterwards. But yeah, all in, coming back to your question, it is certainly picking up again in this region, and we're cautiously optimistic, particularly for some of the larger markets, that we continue to see an increase in volume as we come out of sort of the first quarter and into the second.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. It's nice to know that it's all picking up along the line. And it seems that, what Carol was saying as the buyer, they're wanting that communication and, very difficult to get everyone to standardize, but I think everyone's trying to do their best and work through and be transparent about what we're seeing and the challenges we're facing, about whether we can actually move, and I think, again, it's that communication piece, isn't it? Everyone's just got to keep talking and keep supporting each other as we find our way through this unusual world we're in. I was just wondering, when we sort of had our sort of pre-call, we were sort of talking about technology innovation and what people are doing, and has anybody in the travel market or in our own markets of corporate housing really innovating on a platform or technology? Carol, have you come across anything that sort of really made you thought, they've got it, or that's interesting?
And not so much about, I think there's a lot of things happening in terms of, a lot of these forums talking about, the different, I mean, I can't name a particular platform, and a supplier will probably say, I only spoke to you yesterday, so apologies. But I think there is a lot of things happening out there in that suppliers do want to help, and they do. So they're putting lots of toolkits together. They're doing a lot of these forums, workshops and sessions. So, associations like GBTA with their collaboratory documents that come out every week, and it talks about, what's changing in the industry, who's doing what the hot topics are. We've got BTN, who are not only doing a lot of forums, steer groups, they were very much instrumental in the 31 030 standardization around different standards for risk, managing risk and hygiene and safety, which is what Juliet alluded to. And they're also doing having lots of conversations with the government in terms of how the government can make a change and support the travel industry. You've also got ITM, you've got TAMS. So I think that there is a lot happening out there. And what I would say to people is to get yourself informed, use the time to actually get yourself informed. Attend some of these panel discussions, go to the workshops, join the associations and the groups, and just really get yourself the knowledge and the experience so that you can go and align what's out there, the technology, the processes, the flows, etc., with your culture and your organization based on what you need today, mid-term and then long-term, as Juliet mentioned. So there is a lot happening. I think, some of it can be very overwhelming. I remember when we first started with the whole pandemic piece, there was so much information. And as a buyer, you could quite easily go and throw yourself in a box and shut the lid and hope that no one knew you were there, and even cry, but we don't cry, we just deal with it. So, but I would just say, get yourself informed, talk to people like myself, like Juliet, and other people that are on the panel, understand what they're doing, because you can find something, you can get the knowledge, you can get the support, and you will get there, but don't get overwhelmed by it. Just look at your culture, think about what fits in our world, what is my travelers asking me for, what's important to us today, and don't try and do everything all at once. So that's what I would say, but it's all out there.
No, that's some very wise words there, Carol. Thank you very much. Steve, have you come across anything that sort of really made you think, wow, that's a great piece of kit or a great piece of technology coming out through all this?
Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of companies that have technology, and that in the service department and corporate housing space, I think it was a little bit behind the rest of many different industries with automation and technology. I think part of that is because the sector itself isn't so large that big software companies weren't putting a lot of focus onto it. But as you heard Carol reference earlier, to have a different app for every company isn't particularly user-friendly or helpful. But that's where we are today in our space, and I think it's for good reason. It's because every company is trying to set themselves apart and differentiate themselves. So everybody's creating something different. I think what our industry is still waiting on is a bridge that actually connects these things and makes it truly a one input environment and output environment, but gives access to everybody else's technology. So when that happens, or why that would happen, we'll see. It seems to be a bit of a natural evolution that it really ultimately will be based, I think, off of clients' needs and what they want to see. When that becomes a demand, then I think that will eventually cause somebody, and it has to be a bit agnostic, right? Because as soon as it's tied to one company, other companies don't want to use it. So we've got to find an agnostic method to bridge these different pieces of technology that all have their own positives to it. They're all being developed individually by different companies with different ideas, addressing different challenges in different ways. So I've seen many of them. Between the people that are just on this panel, we've all seen each other's technologies, and there's all something fantastic about the different ones. So technology's there for that. I do think that we're also a little bit behind on the app component versus maybe web-based platforms. Seem to be what's already in existence. I think the apps are going to be maybe the next thing that creates some user-friendly capabilities. But other than that, I think a lot of the innovation is going to come from not necessarily technology, but the business models and how we all pivot to adjust to this gosh, I don't want to say new normal, but it just came into my head.
The dreaded words.
So I think things where if people are working from home and they do have the ability to quarantine in service departments, when borders open, does that create the ability for people to experience the world in a different way and not move somewhere because they need to report to the next office, but because they want to experience the next country? So are there ways for us to help facilitate that for people that can work remotely?
Yeah, I think the word pivot there is absolutely key, isn't it? And although it does feel like some days we're pivoting multiple times trying to keep up, but it is, I think when we do return, there's going to be probably the need for service departments because it's going to be a comfort place. It's not such a busy environment like staying in a hotel. You get that chance of being on your own, but then still experiencing the destination that you're at. Juliet, was along those lines, is there anything you would like to comment or bring to the discussion?
Yeah, and again to Steve's point, yeah, we all have technology-based solutions. We've just upgraded our single source solutions here at National. But again, you were talking about apps, and National has gone through a big acquisition, as you know, period, acquiring Bridge Street V-Suites, and also a company called TMT. Which is a technology company which is going to develop, enhance the guest experience and support compliance, and and really, to Steve's point again, as as we look at these apps, really help and support the whole technology space. But again, there's other apps out there, how you can have touchless check-in, touchless food ordering. I think those are going to increase. Biometrics from airport customs and face recognition is going to become more and more so. And even things like for hotels and apartments, you can have apps that you can control your lighting or your heating before you even get to the apartment, which then you can also control the sustainability part of that. Because you're going to be saving energy. You don't need to leave your room light on all day. You can change it around and change the heating around so that all the heating doesn't have to be on, or the air conditioning to be on in all your rooms all at the same time. So I think that whole AI experience is just going to increase, and we're going to see more and more of that. And it's how us as an industry need to get into that and really shape ourselves up so we're offering the right experience to that as well. And you've got robots. A lot of places have bots. So there's bots at airports, guiding you and helping you. There's bots. I know in APAC there's a lot of bots in some of the hotels out there to help with check-in and so on. And I think that's going to be a future state. Not saying that we're going to have robots everywhere talking on Zoom panels like we are today, but I think it's certainly going to be a future state. But some other trends that I'm seeing, and I know all my fellow colleagues can relate to this, is the unconventional accommodation offering. We're just seeing more and more of that. And I was looking at a recent study, 74% of millennium business travelers stay in a vacation rental property, as opposed to 38% of Gen X and 20% of baby boomers, which I think is huge. And that's obviously going to increase. So, you see people even looking at camper vans, if they could work, somewhere out on the West Coast, somewhere in the US and California, maybe in a camper van by a beach, there's, those kind of options coming out. We can't relate to that, Carol. It's a different world. But yeah, and it's great for our space because we can do that, and the whole co-sharing student living kind of accommodation has been put on hold, but that's going to zoom off again big time. Once we're back to kind of getting normal, that's going to be a huge space to develop. So I think that's going to be a huge trend. And as we see new markets, we're going to we're doing business with new markets. India, Africa and Scandinavia are really coming up. And in APAC, new markets in APAC like Indonesia. It's just like, we're just going to have to adapt our models to deal with buying business and supporting business travelers in those regions too.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I've certainly seen this sort of want for this sort of non-conventional places, which has stretched our teams at times. But I think it's expanding our network, expanding our supply chains, be ready for anything. Yeah, I'm just going to bring Dima in there because I know they've had to do quite a bit of that over in the APAC team.
You mean on the new emerging markets or the technology front?
On their finding unusual places for people to stay.
No,
I know I've certainly sent you some challenges recently.
No, yes, thank you for that again. But no, I mean, but on the technology front, I find it very interesting because we've, as Juliet said, there was a number of really smart innovations, I think, coming out of APAC on the property technology side. So not so much about how providers and vendors have adapted, but more about how actually building developers are planning technology integration in their future buildings thanks to this pandemic. So there is a lot more talk and focus on the whole contactless check-in and checkout systems, but also these sort of integrated health hubs within lobby centers of both business, commercial properties, so offices, or service departments and hotels. And these are sort of integrated units that replace that temperature check or the thermometer that's currently placed on a tripod in the middle of the entrance area, that sort of integrate them now into very smart units that are sort of a mixed terminal for temperature check, for hand sanitizers, but also for QR code scanning. And I think, same as what we said earlier, I think that's where some countries in APAC, in particular China, have made really big strides forward. I would say that probably the China contract tracing app that they have developed is probably leading globally. I mean, there's no country in the world that currently probably knows better where its citizens are and who they meet with. Not that is to be implemented around the world, and not that many other countries would want to implement that, but in terms of the technology that is being developed and the whole process of checking actually into buildings, there's a lot of development on that front. Now, what I haven't seen and heard of very much, neither in APAC, and I don't know whether it's been more of a discussion in EMEA and the US, is the discussion on vaccination passports, and in particular digital vaccination passports. I mean, I think we will all have to come to the reality that probably the next time that we are able to get on a long haul flight will be after we can show some sort of proof that we've been vaccinated, or that will at least come at some point in the summer. But there seems to be very little discussion about how the system would work. And it will be a vital system, because we're already now seeing in APAC, we're seeing the first fake COVID tests being sold online, which is a very scary development. And with that, obviously, you can just imagine that people will do the same thing for vaccination. So I wonder whether the rest of my colleagues here have heard anything on sort of this digital vaccination passport, or vaccination passport in general, that could be applied globally, and that would help the business travel industry.
Who would like to take Dima's question there? Anyone heard anything?
No, I'm throwing one out there, but I thought it may be interesting to hear from the audience as well.
Steve, you're looking like you've got an answer.
No, there's no answer. We just read the articles in the news, just a way that says they anticipate it to come, but no specifics.
No, I think it's a sort of topic that we all talk about, but no one's sure whether it's going to happen. And how it's going to happen. But there we go. I'm quite aware of time, and I just wanted to check in with Susie just to see if we've had any questions come in. Susie, are you there?
Yep, sorry. Yep. No, we have not yet.
Okay, so that's fine. I just didn't want to go over and if we have people wanting to find anything out from us. But please do, if you have got a question, just type it in and Susie will ask it to one of our panel members. Okay, so thank you. No, I sort of going back to the sort of direction on the vaccination passport, for want of a better word. I mean, I find sort of our own governments here in EMEA, everyone seems to be doing a different thing. So I'm going to be quite interested to see how all our governments will come together and work out how they're going to have this standardised, going back to Carol's point of how we are going to all get travelling again and recognise that, you know, you have been vaccinated or you're through it, or you have a T-shirt saying, I've had COVID. I'm not too sure how it was going to work. So before I round up, I just wondered if there was any last words that anybody would like to share, or little pearls of wisdom.
I think Juliet hit on something that really is something for everybody to consider, is the impact and what lessons learned have come out of COVID, the sharp decline in demand in global travel that we saw. And so in the temporary housing space, the core inventory, as we all call it, right, has historically been long-term lease obligations that companies then will continue to rotate people in and out of. Well, when your demand goes down and your occupancy goes down, those lease obligations don't go away. And so what happened as a result of that? Some people bought out of their lease obligations. Some people walked away and didn't live up to their obligations. And so what does that mean in terms of supply for the industry? I think that at least in the near term, we have a reduction in supply. We have a reduction in number of providers and operators. And so I think that the point that Juliet touched on with the concept of these alternative accommodations and how the younger generation has, as they become a bigger part of the traveling population within our client base, are used to it. They like the idea of it. I know it used to be, you would say consistency is what people wanted, right? But I think consistency of high spec is what people want, but differentiation and things being customized to your taste and your preference is okay and almost preferable to this younger generation that's so used to the concept of Airbnb or a vacation rental. And they look at it online, right? And they get excited and they look at the person, their friend or their partner, and they say, look at this place. Look how amazing this place is, right? And it gives you this, this exciting feeling about the accommodations you're going to stay in because it speaks to you and your tastes, and it's individualized. I think not only is that a value add to the traveler's experience, I think prices will go down if we look at alternative accommodations. What I've frequently said to some of our clients is rent is the biggest cost in what it is that we deliver, right? It's 50 to 60% of the overall cost. I personally have never had rent go down next year. It's always gone up. And so how do you reduce the cost of temporary living when the biggest cost that's incorporated in it, that cost never goes down? So you almost have to fundamentally change where you get that inventory from. And so it's far more common throughout EMEA and in Latin America for inventory supply to come through people that are real estate investors that may have a handful of properties, and the pricing mechanism there of a revenue share rather than a long-term lease obligation will create a far more flexible supply dynamic that will keep companies on a more firm financial footing, but also increase the customer's experience and drive down costs at the same time. So Juliet, I think you really hit the nail on the head talking about that. And I'm excited to see where that portion of supply really starts to round out in the future with this industry.
Yeah. But as the buyer, if I can just step in, listening to you, that's all very well and really exciting. But when you're also trying to manage a global program where, you have the whole safety, duty of care, that is where, I talked about, the closeness and the partnering with your suppliers. To go down that road, you also have to tick the other boxes. You can't have people just going off willy-nilly and saying, I'm going to stay in a tent because it's environmentally friendly and it's going to, It's going to reduce our costs, etc., because of the whole safety and risk element around that. So that's why, you know, it's important to recognize these changes. And of course, the sustainability piece is key. You know, looking at our costs is key. But now more than ever, we have an amazing opportunity to readdress what we do, look back at what went well and what didn't work very well, and what's new, and how we can incorporate that into our programs, but caveating the safety, security, and all the other pieces that come together. And that's why all parties, both buyer and supplier, have to be very much linked together and be transparent about what it is that we're looking to achieve. And in so doing, we can look at other opportunities.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Carol. And that's a really nice segue for me to promote Andrew's session, which is all about transparency in the current weeks with EuRA. So thank you for that. That's fantastic. So I think we better draw to a close here, but I really want to thank you all for your time and your insights. I hope our audience has found this interesting. I think certainly we'll be taking away, you know, the piece on communication, sustainability, innovation, you know, and just keep talking, everybody, you know, and we will be there. So thank you so much, everybody, and we hope to see you all again soon. Thank you.
Jess, thank you so much. That was a great session. I can't figure out how to switch on my camera, so I'll just be a disembodied voice. That was fascinating, and you raised some extremely interesting points. I think, you know, the talk about transparency and the duty of care, Carol, thank you for that. I know it's something that we've talked about at EuRA conferences for many years in terms of this sector, but also thanks for bringing up the whole thing about the passports, and also your comment about, you know, fake certification. That's something we're all really going to have to watch in our industry. So thank you so much. Yeah, Jess, you said that the next session is Trust and Transparency, the Voice of the Customer. That's taking place 2 weeks today, same time. But in the meantime, I'd really like to thank Jess, Juliet, Dima, Carol, Steve. Thank you so much for taking the time. Susie, thank you for taking the time for doing the Q&A. Thank you to everybody who dropped in. If you think of a question afterwards, I know I just really must figure out how to switch on my video. There we go. If you figure something out or you have a question, I'm sure that you can forward that on to me. I'll forward that on to Jess in the panel. But in the meantime, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to the panelists, and we'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.